It was supposed to be a simple inspection until the K9 froze at the cupboard, then barked. What they uncovered next connected to something far more dangerous than anyone expected. But how long had it been hidden in plain sight? Here comes the full story, but before we get into it, drop your favorite dog's name in the comments and hit that subscribe button. The sun barely pierced the thick overcast sky that hung over Pinebrook, a small town in upstate New York. Mist clung to rooftops and twisted in the narrow alleys behind the row of houses that made up the oldest part of town. Homes built decades ago, passed down through generations. At 6:52 a.m., Officer Troy Hammond pulled into the driveway of 213 Willow Street. The address had come up in a burglary investigation the night before. 3 homes in the same block had been broken into over the past week, all with eerily similar signs. Back doors left untouched, windows still locked but valuables missing. No forced entry, no fingerprints, no witnesses. And yet somehow whoever was behind it had slipped through like smoke. The only pattern the detectives noticed was that the crimes all happened during the early hours of the morning, and in every case the security footage had a 15-minute gap, static, as if someone knew how to manipulate the feed. Officer Hammond wasn't alone. With him was his K9 partner, Juno, a 5-year-old sable German shepherd who had built a quiet reputation in the department. Not aggressive unless needed, not noisy unless sure. She had once located a missing boy deep in the woods within 2 hours of going cold. She didn't chase shadows. That morning, Juno was already on edge. She had paced in the patrol SUV, sniffing the air vents and turning toward the rear windows repeatedly. Now, as they approached the house, she pulled hard at the leash, tail stiff, head low. Not toward the door, but around the side. The house belonged to a man named Leonard Pratt. Mid-40s, quiet, worked maintenance at the nearby school district. No criminal record. But his home had come up on the radar when one of the stolen items, a hand-engraved gold watch, had pinged on a pawn database 3 towns over. The seller had given a fake name but left behind a receipt that traced back to Pinebrook. And a blurry surveillance image showed a figure entering a dark-colored pickup that matched one parked in Leonard's driveway. Leonard answered the door quickly when Troy knocked. He looked tired but cooperative, and he gave permission to search the home, said he had nothing to hide, no objections. But Juno wasn't interested in the man. She pulled into the living room and stopped, right in front of a plain white cupboard wedged between the sofa and the wall. Troy glanced over. It looked like a regular piece of furniture, nothing strange. But Juno began to bark, once, then again, louder, and she didn't stop. Troy knelt beside her. "Easy, girl. What do you smell?" Juno's nose pressed to the baseboard. Her front paw scratched once, then again. She barked, backing up slightly, then lunged again, teeth bared, not in aggression but urgency. Leonard spoke up from behind. "That's just an old storage unit. It came with the place." But his voice had changed, a half beat too fast. Troy's instincts kicked in. He asked Leonard to step back while he called for a second unit. Inside protocol said if a K9 alerts, the search pauses until backup arrives. Juno remained still, locked in place like she was made of stone. Officer Halstead arrived 10 minutes later. Together they moved the cupboard carefully away from the wall. It was heavier than it looked. Troy knelt again to examine the base. That's when he noticed it. The flooring underneath the cupboard was slightly raised, not aligned with the surrounding hardwood. A false base. He slid a thin knife beneath it and lifted slowly. Click. Inside was a small, sealed space, maybe 2 feet across. Juno let out a single bark the moment it opened. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were several small electronics, phones, memory sticks, and something that looked like a handheld scanner. No labels, no obvious ownership. There was also a leather wallet tucked beneath the cloth. Inside were 3 IDs, all different names, all with the same photo, Leonard Pratt. Troy turned slowly. Leonard's face had changed completely. The tension finally showed, jaw clenched, shoulders pulled tight. He didn't run, he didn't speak, he just stared at the dog. "I think we need a proper tech unit here," Troy muttered. Juno barked once more, still watching the cupboard. They brought in the cyber team. As the digital forensics officer began scanning the drives, the story deepened. Hidden within the memory sticks were folders encrypted with heavy-level security, ones not normally seen outside of professional intelligence operations, and scattered among the files were lists, addresses, names, asset descriptions. Each name matched someone from the neighborhood, and each asset listed had been stolen in the past month. But here's where it twisted further. None of those items had ever been reported because they didn't belong to the victims. They belonged to someone else entirely. A name popped up repeatedly in one file: Isaac Beringer. The name matched a retired police officer who had passed away 2 years prior under unusual circumstances. No foul play had been confirmed, but neighbors whispered about him being involved in something higher up. No files had ever surfaced until now. Inside one folder was a scanned letter, dated 3 years ago, written by Beringer. It referenced a locker number at the Grayson Avenue storage facility and warned of a network within town, people who had vanished, people with secrets, and a warning to watch who you trust, especially those closest. The next step was clear. They obtained a warrant for the storage locker mentioned. Juno rode quietly in the back as the cruiser turned down Grayson Avenue. The clouds were thick now, rain beginning to mist the windshield. She shifted only once, right as they passed a narrow alley behind the corner drugstore. And again she growled. Troy noted it, made a mental note to double-check that later. The storage unit was opened at 3:14 p.m. Inside, boxes of files, photographs, maps of the town with red markings across neighborhoods, dozens of them, and a second name surfaced: Daniel Halstead. Officer Halstead, the same one who had responded to Troy's request earlier that morning. Troy froze. One of the files showed Halstead and Leonard together, smiling, casual, in civilian clothes, dated 6 months ago. Halstead had said he'd never met Leonard before today. Juno sat beside the storage unit's door, tail still, eyes forward, watching, as if she already knew something else was coming. The wind had picked up by late afternoon. Rain fell in fine needles across the windshield as Officer Troy Hammond stared at the photograph in his hand. Halstead and Leonard, shoulder to shoulder, framed by the entrance of what appeared to be an auto shop, both in plain clothes, dated 6 months ago. Halstead had claimed he had never met Leonard Pratt before this morning's call. No connection, no background. Yet here they were, grinning. Troy's thoughts churned, questions stacking on top of each other. Why lie? Why would a patrol officer, one with a clean record and no disciplinary history, be connected to a man hiding stolen electronics, burner IDs, and surveillance photos? And why bury them behind a cupboard in a quiet house in Pinebrook? Juno sat in the back of the patrol vehicle, calm but focused. Her eyes didn't dart. She didn't yawn. She just watched, silent, unmoving, like she was waiting for Troy to catch up. And something told him he needed to listen to her more than ever now. Back at the station, digital forensics had begun to process the drives. Most of the content was encrypted, but some folders weren't locked. Inside were surveillance photos, neighborhood streets, license plates, city employees, even town council members. And one folder stood out, titled Asset 6, Move Date Unknown. Inside that folder were 5 photographs. All were of a young woman in her late 20s, blonde hair, usually walking a small beagle. The photos had timestamps. 2 of them were from just last week. Troy leaned in closer. The woman's face was familiar. He opened the department records database. Her name was Rachel Halstead, Halstead's younger sister. She wasn't in the system for anything illegal, but she had applied for a city surveillance technician job the year prior and didn't pass the background check due to sensitive associations. Nothing had ever been made public. What kind of association? And why was she in Leonard's files? Troy printed the images, added them to the evidence folder, and sent a silent message to his lieutenant. No accusation yet, just the beginnings of a pattern. By early evening, Juno was back at Lengtier's house. Though Lengtier had been taken into custody, the search warrant allowed further inspection. Troy walked the perimeter again, something still bothering him. Juno moved toward the back hallway. The first time they'd entered, she had passed it. Not a bark, not even a sniff. But now she stopped at a door Troy hadn't noticed earlier, painted to blend in without a knob. Juno pawed it once, then again. Troy tapped the panel. Hollow. He traced the trim with a flashlight and found a small groove, a hidden hinge. He called for tools. 20 minutes later, they'd removed the outer panel. It was a narrow staircase, unfinished, concrete steps descending into darkness. Juno didn't hesitate. She started down the stairs like she'd walked them before. What they found below was not what they expected. It wasn't a workshop, or a panic room, or even storage. It was a listening post. 3 old computers, one still humming faintly, 2 headsets, a soundboard wired with antennas, and on the wall, pinned photos of residents, markers, a map with grid overlays of the town, and a box labeled drop schedules, inside, timestamps, location names, marked envelopes with initials. Troy reached for the top envelope. The initials read TH, his. Inside was a photograph, his home taken at night from across the street. Juno barked once, sharp and sudden. Troy turned. She was standing at the edge of the room, growling at a cabinet. He opened it slowly. Inside was a large duffel bag, packed, ready, money, multiple sets of keys, a laptop, a prepaid phone, and under a flap, a small encrypted USB, marked Final Backup, if TH is compromised. Troy's hands tightened. Compromised. How deep did this go? Back at the station, they cracked the USB's file structure. Inside, a document titled Cover Protocol, Blue Trace. It read like instructions, not for Leonard, not for Halstead, for someone else. The document gave steps for how to evade questioning, how to erase surveillance footprints, and how to redirect suspicion using falsified evidence logs. Then came the most confusing line. Ensure K9 unit remains isolated. Do not allow secondary access after alert point. Troy froze. That was Juno. She had been the one to alert at the cupboard. Someone hadn't expected that, and someone had written her into the escape plan as a variable to be cut off if she interfered. They brought Halstead in again. Troy watched through the mirrored glass. Halstead sat still, not angry, just tired. The investigator placed the image of him with Leonard on the table. Nothing. Then came the folder with Rachel's photos. That's when he blinked. Troy leaned closer to the glass. The investigator slid the final document forward, the one referencing Blue Trace. Halstead finally spoke, very softly. Check the safe house. What safe house? The investigator asked. Halstead looked up. The one you didn't find yet. Troy took Juno back through town that night, retracing paths near the addresses listed in the drop schedule file. At 10:22 p.m., she stopped outside an abandoned brick home on Coral Street, boarded up, condemned 2 years ago. She barked once, then again and again. Her tail went stiff, her body dropped low. She wasn't just alerting, she was bracing. They called in backup and entered cautiously. Inside, the house was nearly empty, but in the basement, a workstation, fresh food wrappers, 2 sleeping bags, and a notepad. Open, fresh ink, the words written on the top page. Tonight, exit point, cover through Coral Creek. Rain had turned to fog by the time Officer Troy Hammond returned to Coral Street the following morning. The abandoned safe house had been swept clean overnight. No suspects inside, no sign of forced exit, just the chilling note left behind, as if the person inside had been watching the watchers the entire time. Tonight. Exit point. Cover through Coral Creek. Who had written it? Leonard? Rachel? Someone else? That question would not wait long, because as Troy and Juno circled back around the rear of the property, the dog froze. Juno's body lowered, her nose pressed to the damp soil behind the collapsed fence line. She barked, low, drawn out, tense. Then she ran, straight toward the creek. Coral Creek was shallow but fast, swollen from last week's storms. Just 50 yards downstream, a rusted utility bridge arched across the narrowest point. Beneath that bridge, overgrowth, mud, and one thing that did not belong. A freshly disturbed grate. Juno circled it once, twice, then dropped into a crouch. Troy called it in immediately, requesting backup, thermal support, and drone visuals if possible. But by the time he opened the grate and peered inside, he didn't need thermal. There were footprints. In the mud, booted, fresh, leading into a service tunnel that snaked beneath the town, believed to have been sealed after the sewer renovations 4 years earlier. It had not been sealed, and someone knew that. Troy followed, flashlight flickering across aged concrete and riveted pipe. Juno led the way, ears sharp, tail stiff, alert at every bend. 200 feet in, they found it, another cache, 2 duffel bags, a tactical vest, and taped beneath the pipe a cell phone still powered. Inside the bag were more photos, this time not of council members, not of civilians. They were of officers. Photos of patrol vehicles, license plates, security camera blind spots near the department's back entrance. And again, one photo stood out. A young woman walking into the side staff door at Precinct HQ. Rachel Halstead. Troy returned to the precinct and quietly reviewed all visitor logs from the past month. Rachel had not been listed as a guest, but she had been on camera twice, once entering the building through the loading dock, once exiting an hour later with a clipboard and an envelope. Both times she wore a delivery badge from a fake vendor company, something that hadn't existed in city registries. They ran the company name Null Serve Logistics. No record, no license, no tax trail. Just one listing, a rented P.O. box outside of New Brunswick. The connection was clear. She was the courier. When federal agents joined the task force that afternoon, a theory began to take shape. Leonard was the builder. Rachel was the runner. Halstead was the sleeper. His job? Blend in, divert suspicion, provide cover in case any piece of the plan got exposed, and it nearly worked. Until Juno sniffed something behind the cupboard. But there was still one more unanswered question. Why now? Why all the data collection? Why the effort to stay hidden for years, only to begin moving pieces now? That answer came from the final decrypted document on the second USB drive. Phase 2, Cabinet Protocol, May 12. Today was May 10. Troy circled back to one key detail. The cabinet reference could not just mean storage or electronics. It had to mean people, the city council. The document contained initials, 5 of them each matching senior council members set to vote on a controversial surveillance rollout bill 2 days from now. A bill that, if passed, would enable the full digitization of Glendale's municipal systems, including its police surveillance grid. If someone were trying to quietly take control or corrupt that system, it made sense to move before the vote passed. In short, Leonard and his network were trying to map and sabotage the very system that would have exposed them later. But the question remained, who was left to execute it? Leonard was in custody, Halstead suspended, Rachel missing. Juno had the answer. Late that evening, a tip came from a resident living near the Old River Terminal. He reported a woman in uniform entering a service lot through the back, matching Rachel's description. Troy and Juno were dispatched. The terminal hadn't been in use for 6 years. Flood damage made it unsafe for heavy cargo. But small vehicles still used the side garage for temporary rentals. One was active, a white van with a city contractor logo. Juno began barking before they even stepped out of the cruiser. She pulled hard, racing toward the side of the building, nose in the air, weaving toward the main gate. Behind the warehouse was the van, running, empty. But nearby, a trapdoor cracked open, leading down into a cold storage unit that had been long forgotten. Inside, Rachel Halstead, armed, cornered, and in the middle of trying to remotely trigger a data corruption script stored on the last hard drive. Juno launched before she could hit the keys. It wasn't an attack, it was a takedown, clean, fast, trained. She was restrained within seconds, and the hard drive, still intact. The case that started with a dog barking at a cupboard ended with a K9 saving the department's entire digital network. Troy stood beside Juno as the agents took Rachel into custody. He looked down at his partner. "You knew the whole time, didn't you?" Juno blinked slowly, tongue lolling slightly. She didn't need credit. She didn't need words. She had found the thread when no one else saw the fabric. In the aftermath, a commendation ceremony was quietly held. Juno received a plaque, though she only seemed interested in the biscuit Troy handed her afterward. But the city would not forget what happened, how one bark behind a cupboard pulled apart a network of betrayal, how one alert shifted the course of an entire plan, and how a dog guided by instinct, trust, and an unbreakable bond uncovered a threat no one else could see, all because she refused to walk away from what others would have ignored. The cupboard was never the danger. It was the silence hiding behind it. If you are listening till now, just wait till you see what's coming next. We've got more real cases and heroic dogs that'll blow your mind. So hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed, because the next one, you won't want to miss it.